Hi fellas, I'm Homer. Really like hobbies. Today, let's talk about some bonsai. Hobbies are what you do when you want to convince yourself you're an interesting person. If you're like me, you find a new hobby every few months and try to convince your friends and family you could possibly make a lot of money. But, you know. Let's get into bonsais. Tiny trees in pots. Bonsai is the art of growing a tree in a pot. If you're into or you want to get into bonsai, then you can trace your ancestry back to a samurai. Or you've been watching too much anime. I'm assuming you're the latter. Like most cool stuff in Japan, bonsai started in China. The good people there started planting trees in tiny pots and breaking them to their will about 3,000 years ago during the Zhou dynasty. I lived in China for a long time. These things are everywhere. When I first moved there, I asked some local folks if they had any bonsai I could buy. All I got back was a bunch of confused faces, probably because I wasn't speaking Chinese. But later I found out how to speak the local stuff and tried again. So they showed me a lot of trees and pots, and I bought a ton of them. So step 1, find a big pot. If you know what Crunchyroll is, you know that these should be planted in shallow pots, but not yet. We start big. You get that big deep pot and you plant a tree in it. Any tree can work, but it's better if you pick a style you want to copy. Bonsai is very rigid, so we gotta stick to these style guides. Step 2, let that little tree grow up a bit. If you can cut it down to a good thick trunk and let new branches grow out, all the better. Remember, we're trying to trick everyone into thinking we're giants walking around in a tiny forest, so it has to look old. We make it old with proportions. Proportions are a silly important thing for bonsai people. If you fall into this community, you will hear people talk about proportions like they're telling you the secrets of the universe. So let's get those right. We want a well-tapered trunk, girthy at the bottom and thinning out towards the top. We also want those branches well placed. Step 3, pruning. Pruning helps us keep these little fellas tiny. This is the first main step in exerting your will over a living thing and breaking it to grow and live how you plan. The goal is to create a bonsai that accurately represents a miniature version of a full-scale thing in its natural environment. The best time to prune your tree is during spring, although there are some differences depending on the type of tree you have. Just figure that out and prune it during that time. Some things we're going to prune. First, we're going to get us a big table and put that big pot on it. Then plant your tree inside. The tree's going to look terrible right now because it's just a rubbish tree you found from Lowe's. Now, we're going to identify which branches to cut. If there are any branches too close to the bottom, cut it off. Next, find any branches that twist behind another branch and cut it off too. After that, you're going to find any branch that is in the same plane as another branch on that trunk, like this one, that one, this one, or these. Just cut them all off. Now we're left with a tree that kind of has the right branches we need. Here's some examples of possible bonsai styles. I'm not going to try to say any of their names because I'm already talking about bonsai and I don't want to be made fun of anymore. Now let's get closer and look at actually how to prune one of these things. So here's a basic tree. This would be a terrible bonsai, but it's just for our purposes of explaining how to actually cut one of these branches off. You're going to grab your concave cutters and get really close to the tree trunk. With the concave side towards the trunk, you're going to cut it. You want a little hollow in the trunk to be dished out so that when the tree heals, it heals over that cut instead of leaving a little nub that sticks out and makes everybody really uncomfortable. After we've got your tree all pruned up, the next part is wiring. Wiring is when any idea that this was a natural thing completely evaporates. Take your wire, make sure it's thick enough to hold the branch but not so thick that it moves the tree around the wire instead of the wire around the tree. Start wrapping up from the base. As you wrap up, you're going to wrap that same wire around the branch all the way out to the tip. Once the branch is fully wired, you're going to move it maybe once or twice every couple months. This is a very slow process, and if you use too much force or put too much stress on the tree, it will break. So our tree's been growing in a big pot for a couple of years maybe, or maybe just 1 year, depending on how impatient you are and how long you can wait. Get a table and put your big pot on there with your tree inside. Gently remove the tree from inside the big pot. We're going to lift your tree out of the pot, and you're going to see a long taproot that goes all the way to the bottom. We need to remove that taproot so that the tree will fit in our tiny pot. Take your cutters and begin removing any of the roots that are deeper than where the pot will sit. Next, put your tree into the tiny pot. You're going to need some wire to hold it down so that it doesn't fall over because you just cut off all its roots. Now we sit back and hope that the tree lives. It probably will because it's tiny, but you're going to need to devote a lot of your time to watering and watching this thing. One time I left all my trees at my parents' house, and when I got back they were all dead. No one cares about your bonsai but you. So give up on vacation. But who needs a vacation? Because now you can sit on your back porch and look at tiny trees and contemplate your life decisions. The community. Like all hobbies, there is a community. The /bonsai subreddit has over 280,000 members. That is a bunch of other people just like you that want to post pictures of tiny trees and talk about proper proportions. So even though none of your real-life friends and family are impressed with your amazing dedication, you can pretend people care by entering a community of like-minded people whose families also don't care. Money. Most hobbies don't ever actually make money, but bonsai can be a little different. These trees can go for a pretty penny if you sell them to the right people. Even a poorly maintained bonsai can fetch a ton of money if you hold on long enough. Never break down the hourly earnings of time you've invested into that $3,000 tree, but still, you can sell these little things for a car. Will your mom bring up the fact that had you worked a minimum wage job for the same hours you poured into forcing a tree to look like a big tree in a tiny pot, and that you would have the exact same amount of money? Yes. But what hobbies does your mom have? Nothing. So clearly you won that argument. Now subscribe so I can buy more bonsai and feed my never-ending need to accumulate more hobbies. Bye.